Lawrie Goes Loco is sponsored by the Foxfield Railway.
Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM, and if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel at the moment, how about giving this video a like and maybe subscribing to the channel to help us grow, and perhaps even check out our Patreon. Today I'm in a very blustery, wet and generally unpleasant Wales as we return to the Talyllyn Railway next door to the brand new coach number 24. And today is a very special day because we're here to drive something on its last day before it's taken out of service. So welcome to Lawrie Goes Loco. Behind me is Talyllyn number 6, and this is made by one of my all-time favourite locomotive builders, Andrew Barclay, which means that instantly I love this. Without having a go or even touching it, I love it. I love the aesthetics of it. It just looks such a powerful little locomotive. And what's particularly noteworthy about today is this is its last day in traffic as its 10-year boiler certificate comes to an end. Now, in very simple layman's terms, a steam locomotive has a 10-year life on its boiler. From when that boiler is certified, ready for use, 10 years from that date, it then has to be taken out of traffic and recertified. There are various extensions and things that can happen, but just to keep this simple for now, 10 years. And today will be the last time that this actually goes out. And yours truly here has the honour of taking it out for one final trip up the line, which is really, really exciting and one absolute hell of an honour. Because I really, really like this thing. Now, you'll notice that it's a slightly weird shape, and that's because this is a well tank locomotive, which means the water is carried between the frames. So there's no chunky side tanks or even the saddle going over the top of the boiler. It means that all the water is down there, which also, rather usefully, it means that there's no internal motion, so everything's on the outside. That's going to make my prep a lot easier. I also really like the colour it's in. It wears this blue particularly well. It's very smart and also helps break up the Talyllyn's fleet, with numbers 2, 7 and 3 currently in green. Having a light blue engine really helps for families coming along to know that they've travelled behind the light blue engine. There are a couple of things on this which are slightly different to your standard narrow gauge engine. For instance, it has buffers, and although this is the standard for the Talyllyn Railway, it still looks weird on a narrow gauge engine to be fully fitted with a proper drawbar and buffers. Most engines that look like this have the standard knuckle coupling where you put the bar and pins in, so having proper buffers looks slightly strange. Although, once you've seen it with buffers, to think of it without would be even more strange. As with all the other Talyllyn locomotives, it is air braked and so has been fitted with the air pump on the side here to generate brake. This is for the continuous brake to allow it to work passenger trains. In layman's terms, the brake system is pumped full of air and you release air from the system to apply the brakes. The idea being that if the train was to come apart, all the air rushes out and the brakes come on. Thus, there is a safe working for passenger stock. Now, obviously, lots of you will recognise this distinctive shape from a certain well-known and very much loved series of railway books, because this one became the inspiration for one of the characters in that. There are several things on this engine that I particularly like. The long tall chimney, the tall cab, and the absolutely colossal whistle. Now, I'm led to believe that that has been permanently borrowed from Britannia, which means it's going to be absolutely glorious. I also like the fact we have this pseudo running board that's never finished that comes out around here. It kind of gives it the impression of being a dodgem, just to keep you away from all the nice motion. You kind of feel that there should be something on top of it, but if you were to cover that up, it may get into all your motion a lot more challenging. So it's just a kind of weird, I don't know, I like that a lot. I also like the exposed steam pipes. It just makes it look a lot more utilitarian. Now, this thing weighs just over 8 tons, and with its 2-foot driving wheels, delivers a tractive effort of 3,219, whatever it is we measure tractive effort in, which means for its size, it actually has a whole lot of go. In fact, the most limiting factor of this will be its weight, because there's not a whole lot of engine here. It's certainly a very different style to the rest of the other Talyllyn locomotives, as the majority of them are saddle tank or side tank. This thing really stands out as being something very, very different. And until Tom Rolt was constructed here, this was the newest arrival on the railway. And although it is the newest engine that had a life elsewhere to be here, it has since become synonymous with the railway itself. The engine was designed to be able to go around sharp corners in a yard, hence the very short wheelbase. The whole thing is just over 15 foot long, but the wheels, well, there's almost 4 foot between them and each end. The overhang is quite impressive. Now, this thing was built by Berkeley way back in 1918 and it's works number 1437. It was provided brand new to the Air Service Construction Corps and it was their number 1. That then became the RAF. So this was brand new. In fact, this predates the RAF and remains the oldest operational piece of RAF machinery, which is why it's in this livery now. To celebrate its 100th and the 100th anniversary of the RAF decided they'd, well, adopt it. Hence why it now has the roundels on it. They're not just there for fun, they're actually there because this actually has a proper link to the RAF. The other big thing to note about this is when it was brand new, it was not indeed a 2'3" locomotive. This, like most narrow gauge locomotives, was actually 2 foot gauge. Not content with just being number 1 of the Air Service Construction Corps, this was also the first of Berkeley's light class, which effectively went on to become the E-class. Now, this is a basically complete plagiarism of an O&K design, with a few little differences. Mostly this one is actually metric. This one also has some subtle differences to later designs, the regulator being on the side of the dome rather than in a different place on the latter designs. But basically, I don't know how they managed to get away with copying an O&K design so closely, because from a distance, you'd be forgiven for mistaking this for an O&K. As mentioned, that this was supplied brand new to what became the RAF and went to the base at Manston, but it only stayed there for a few years, and in 1921 it moved on to Cowshot, where it remained for 28 years, although towards the end of that it had come out of service and had been sheeted up along with its sister, which was the number 2, where it was purchased by Abelson and Co, who took it back to their yard with the idea of rebuilding this one and its sister and selling them on and turning a healthy profit. However, by this point, people weren't really looking for locomotives. And in truth, they did almost sell them. They very nearly sold these to the Indian Railways. However, they didn't pass the Indian Railways standards. The mothole doors, which are inspection areas, you remove them so you can peer inside the boiler, were too small and thus weren't up to specification. And so this did not go off to India. So this is a locomotive that was rejected by Indian Railways, and I really like that. In the meantime, the fledgling Talyllyn Railway had come together and had started asking friends, and then friends of friends, and then just blatantly asking anybody if they had anything at all that they could possibly donate to help keep this railway running. And through this, the railway received lots of lovely gubbins, but still really could do with another engine. And one particular volunteer, on his regular bus route from the top deck, could see a little locomotive, in fact, a pair of little locomotives sitting in a yard. And so he informed the Talyllyn Railway, who promptly wrote off to the company asking for donations. And the company came back to them and went, well, sorry lads, but we can't really give you any money, but we do have an engine, perhaps you'd like that instead. And what's particularly interesting about this tale is the rumours go that it was indeed the yard foreman who responded because the boss was away, who basically went, just get rid of this poxy engine, we don't want it. And when the boss came back, he went, oh yeah, we're giving away the engine, but don't worry, we're going to name it after you. Hence why this is known as Douglas. And so in 1953, it moved to Hunt Bros for rebuilding and recertification. The most noteworthy part of this was the fact that it got a little bit wider, as the wheels were pushed out by 1.5 inches each side and some rather hefty gaskets put in between the cylinders to space them out, bringing it to the Talyllyn Railway's 2'3". And this conversion and restoration to service was all funded by Abelson, making this actually one hell of a donation. Following its rebuilding conversion, the locomotive came here in 1954 and re-entered traffic, although it didn't actually straight away. You see, because of the tall chimney and the tall cab, the locomotive was out of gauge with the railway. Here at Cunville, you'll notice that it's a rather tight fit between the particularly high chimney and that of the bridge. You'll note that there is quite a dip in the track bed through this section. And that's because in order to get this thing to fit along this line, they had to dig out the track bed and physically lower the railway for this to trundle through. And this isn't the only place on the railway this had to happen. There are a number of different locations that they had to do modifications. And I like the fact that they took that method towards it, rather than going, oh, we'll cut a bit out the cast chimney and lower the cab. No, they went, we'll adjust the railway, and that is the proper way to do it. Initially though, the crews weren't particularly fond of it. Because of its short wheelbase and the less than stellar quality of the track at the time, this thing quickly picked up a reputation for rough riding and was known as the rock and roller because it rode so poorly and frequently came off the railway and developing a ground fault. This was so regular that the crew got so good at putting it back on the rails that they could do it in less than half an hour. And since then, it's not really done much, as there aren't many other 2-foot 3 gauge railways in the country, with it being basically the Corris, which at that point had disappeared. There was nowhere else for it to go. In 1995, the locomotive was in need of repairs off-site, and so it was commandeered to go to an RAF display at Hendon, and as part of that, the trip was diverted slightly so this could go back to its old stonking ground at Cowshot, and just have a photo of this is where it used to be. Apart from that, well, it's not actually done anything at all, apart from going to the North Yorkshire Moors Railway because they were having an RAF-themed gala, and this had just been repainted into these colours to celebrate its 100th anniversary. A gala, in fact, that I happened to be at, and if you've seen the North Yorkshire Moors TV programme, you'll have seen me shouting at some people who were in the way of my photo. But I was on the train of a photo charter with this, which is one of the few times it's actually been away from the railway full stop. Apart from that, there isn't much more to add to its history. In its last overhaul, it received a brand new boiler. The one that had been supplied new in 1918 was life expired, although its connection to the RAF hasn't yet ended. The rumours are that when the fighters are flying around the Mach loop used for training, they test their heat-seeking capabilities by targeting the locomotives on the Talyllyn Railway. So it's gone from being used by them to still being used in a very different way. Whilst number 1 here was saved for preservation, we don't know what happened to its sister and assume that it was cut up for scrap. However, bits of it do live on. Originally, number 1 was an opened back locomotive. The handbrake came out over the back of the cab here, and there was nothing here. Now, for those of you who have visited Wales, you'll know that the sun doesn't shine here all the time, and having a locomotive that had no rear to the cab coming downhill with the rain blasting into your face is less than enjoyable. So it was decided that this would have a fully enclosed cab. And these bits, these are the front windows that came off this one's sister, number 2. So a little bit of its sister live on with this one here. One of the most noteworthy things about this engine's ties to the RAF was during the nationwide celebrations of the RAF's 100, during the event that was here at the Talyllyn Railway. Not only was it parked up next to a Spitfire, but the crew was made of current and former RAF members, which was a wonderful way to really solidify its links to the RAF. And with that, none of us can really believe that this thing is coming to the end of its 10-year ticket. It seems like only yesterday that it returned into service. And it's a real shame because this thing has become a firm favourite with crews and the public alike. So with that, I suppose we should go back in time to first thing this morning and start getting it ready for its last day in service.
But first, a word from our sponsor.
This is the Foxfield Railway, a 2.5 mile award-winning industrial railway near Stoke-on-Trent in Staffordshire.
You guys know by now that I've been coming to the Foxfield Railway for years, and 2025 is set to be one of the best years yet. The railway reopens on Mother's Day, where you can get a delicious afternoon tea, which I've had and can definitely vouch for, and then the action-packed War Wheels returns on the 17th and 18th of May, and last year it was absolutely amazing, and this year there's going to be a Spitfire on display as well. And I can exclusively announce that this year the Foxfield Railway is going to be hosting its first ever model railway show and miniature mayhem weekend, and also they offer a cracking driver experience course on a route that's actually pretty fun and challenging. And to help me out here at LMM and to keep up to date with things that are going on at the railway, sign up for the newsletter, remembering to click the "You found us through LMM" to let them know that you found them through me. And with that, on with your regular content.
So having successfully travelled back in time to first thing this morning, it's time to do the 5 checks that we do every time we get onto the footplate of a steam locomotive. And that's to make sure that the regulator is shut, the reverser is in mid-gear, the cylinder drains are open, the handbrake is on, and then to make sure we actually have water inside the frame. We do. So with that, we're going to go to the front end and check that. Having made sure that the footplate is safe, we can work our way down to the front of the engine. Coming here to make sure that the clacks are open. Now the clacks are a one-way valve in the side of the boiler that allows water from the injector to come through into the boiler, and then boiler pressure will shut it afterwards. We shut those down and now make sure they're open, because if they're not open, the injectors don't work and we can't get water into the boiler, and that's generally bad. Anyway, at this end, we come to inspect the smoke box. So I'll undo this like so, open that, and swing it open. And that's superb, it's all been cleaned out for me, and we're looking for any signs of moisture, any unusual patterning in the ash, and if we could see daylight, because all of that would be bad. I'm paying particular attention to the wash-up plugs in there, and that all looks absolutely superb. So we can shut that back up and do it up tight. It's important to make sure this is tight, because you need a vacuum in here for the draft to work and for the engine to draw. You'll notice along here, and for those of you who saw my video on Dolgok, that we have a little fitting here where we can plug in an air line, and we can use that to create an artificial blower to help draw the fire. This has already been warmed up because we're in the depth of winter, so it's already hot, so we're not going to need that today. So we're going to do it the old traditional way. Right, let's check the firebox. Having returned and turned the clack on this side, we're ready to have a look inside the fire. It is a tiny, tiny firebox. So as this has had a warming fire in it to make sure it's warm to fight off the cold winter's frost, I've got to get rid of some of this last fire. And with that, and with the fire all cleared out, I can now go in and have an inspection and make sure it's all dry in there, there's no weeping at all, and to check the fusible plug in the crown of the firebox. If this was a normal locomotive and we'd done this in the normal way, this would now be the time to throw in the coal and the wood to light my fire. However, as we've done this in a slightly different way, there is a very, very crucially important next step, and that is to reach in and remove the work light from the firebox. Whilst this does make it a lot easier to see your fire as you're building it, it generally doesn't go well once you set fire to it. With small engines like this, I like to put a ring of coal around the outside of the firebox first. And having successfully got my ring of coal in there, I can now add my wood. Now, it's important when laying a fire to make sure that every piece of wood is layered carefully next door to the other to ensure the most efficient fire as possible. Just throwing the wood into the firebox, a good fire will not make. This stage is crucially important. If you muck this up, the fire won't go, and that will be the end of the day. With our fire laid, the next stage is to open up the damper. The last thing to do in here before we throw the match in is to make sure the manifold is open. So this valve here isolates all of the gubbins around here. So it's important to make sure that this is open, so the steam, when we get it, can actually go to all the parts we need it to go to operate things like the injectors, the whistle, all those important things. And with that, I've got a couple of things just to check outside. On the outside, there's a couple of places that we need to inspect. Like here, we have our washout plugs, and there's a couple of mod hole doors we need to look as well. So, having checked everything on the outside and determined that it's okay and ready to be steamed, we work our way back onto the footplate, open up the fire hole door, recover our shovel, and some of these convenient rags that have been soaked with oil. And place that there, and get the old traditional way of doing this, because we're going to do this with a match. And we use our fire to light our other rags, and use that to help spread the fire out throughout the firebox. And with our rags on fire inside the firebox, we can shut that up and go and make a start on the prep. With the fire lit, I can make a start on doing the motion, which means I've got to get down on my knees down here and start on the big ends.
Hi Lawrie, we have these really cool motion cleaning seats, specifically for this. You should find yourself one.
Having been unable to find one of the cool little seats, it's back to this. So we start off back here working on the big end, and then on this for the rear coupling rod there. And we can shuffle ourselves along. And we've got 3 fillers on here for the valve guide lubrication here. And this one's really cool because it lifts up with a little hole and you fill up the little canister like that. And then I think that's great. There are a couple of things on this that are on grease, like the reverser pivot itself there and the return crank. So we'll come back to those in a minute. The rocker itself here has got a grease point as well, but there's oil going in the main pivot here. And then down here where the return crank comes in there. Then we wiggle ourselves a bit longer and we have this, which fills up the entire of the crosshead, which is a big old reserve of oil. And then the lubricator for the front of the coupling rods. Fill that one up. And then down under here, we've got one underneath, and then the return here, here, and going in there. Now we have a lubricator for the valve spindle itself here with this little pot, and one that dribbles onto the piston rod as well. Now at this railway we are using lube for all of this. Some other roads have different ideas, but here we use lube. A little bead across there, and a little bead just on the slider there. And that is all there is on this side, apart from the aforementioned grease. So I've got to go find a grease gun next. Having relieved Luke of his duty, I acquired myself one of those fancy little steps. Having completed all of my oiling up, I've now been presented with the grease gun, which goes onto the return crank here like so, and put a bit of grease into there. Move along here, a bit of grease into the reverser link here, and take that off, and then into here goes into the rocker itself, like so. Now obviously I have to do this on the other side as well, and that's where all of the steam lubrication is. So, off to the other side. This is so much better. And having completed all my lubrication on this side, all I need to do now is to do the steam pump. So we have a little lube oiler here for the air side, which goes down here. So that gives us lubrication for the compressor side of it down here. And then putting this oil can down, we come over here to this lubricator, thus. And the first stage is to drain it. Having drained out all of the water, we can do the drain back up and now remove the top and fill this up with its own special non-tannin oil, like so. And having screwed that back down and wiped off the excess oil, all we have to do now is move over here to the mechanical lubricator. Now this handily has a sight glass on the side, and as you can see from that, that is already full of oil. And in fact, if I have a look in there, it's absolutely brimmed. So I don't need to do anything on that at all. That's all ready to go. And with that, that completes the lubrication out here. And there's just one thing to do in the cab, and then I need to clamber up there and check that it's got some sand in it, because out there, it is miserable. So with everything else complete, my last bit of lubrication is just come in here and do the steam brake lubricator just there, which is in this nice handy Heritage squeezy bottle. And with that, that completes the oiling up. But there's still one job to do. Having clambered on top, because the sandbox is on top of the boiler to dry out the sand, which is a really clever idea. This has also been painted in the RAF render, which is just great. Have a look in here and go, there is indeed sand. And having established we have got nice, dry, heated sand, I'll hop in the cab and just make sure this operates. Like most of the engines here at the Talyllyn, this one has its own particular fan club. And for that, this one is pride of the fleet. So today we're running with that. The best thing about this particular headboard is it has a big note on the back saying we can't put it on number 2. With all the prep work now complete, it's a good time to have a look on board the flight deck or the command centre of Douglas. So, standing straight in front of me, we have the back head with our 2 gauge frames. Obviously we have isolator for the top, isolator for the bottom, and then the drains there. Straight in front of me, we have the firebox door, which has a lovely fire burning way, which I built. Beneath that down there, we have the damper, which opens up a flap underneath the fire to allow more air in, and hidden underneath that, we have the blowdown valve. Now that is so we can open a valve straight from the boiler to blow out any of the undesirable impurities that will gather by the use of water treatment. So it's a good way to make sure the water inside is still nice and clean. So moving on to the stuff that's actually useful, it has a seat. Single most useful function on any locomotive is a seat for the driver. It's also fitted with air conditioning. If I open that and do that, that is air conditioning on full, and that is air conditioning off. Very, very useful. The regulator is over here, which is very much a driver side control, and you can see the shaft going all the way to the actual valve on the side of the dome. The reverser is just here as well, with a steam brake for the locomotive here, and the air brake controls here. There's also an isolator down here that if you've got 2 engines working, you can isolate the brake so it doesn't charge on the engine that doesn't need to make brake. We have the communication system here, the buzzer there, so we can talk to the guard. And then moving our way across, we have the gauge for our air. This tells us not only how much air we actually have in the tank, but also how much we're applying to the train. Next door to that, we have the pressure gauge, and in the middle, we have the whistle. We have the blower control here, and then this is the steam feed for the air pump. Obviously, for air brakes, we need to charge to fill the air tank full of compressed air, so this is the feed that will charge up that. The injector steam is this one and this one, with the water taps being tucked there and there. The manifold shut-off is this, which will isolate all of that, and tucked around here we have the isolator for the steam brake. Obviously, if we need to fill it up with steam oil during the day, we can turn that down to shut it off to make sure it's not got live steam behind it. We have the cylinder drains here, and then over here is the sanding control. There's an isolator just tucked around there so we can shut down the pressure gauge should we need it, and down here we have the coal bunker. And tucked behind me, we have the handbrake. It's a lovely little cab, and I really appreciate the extra headroom that being a high engine gives me, which means I can walk around in here quite happily without fearing of whacking my head. And that basically is it. It's a wonderful little cab. It's quite a sizable backhead that actually protrudes back here, but there is still a fair amount of room for you and your fireman on it. If you started having driver, fireman, cleaner, then it gets a bit tighter, but actually for this, it's pretty good. Visibility forward is superb because there is no tank. Because it's a well tank, I have a good view down the side of the boiler. It's akin to being on a almost mainline engine. And of course, the big chimney and the big dome mean that I can't see anything over that side, and when you're driving, you can't see over this side, which means you are reliant on the person on the other side of the cab to make sure that everything is clear. It is nice and airy though, and the fact that I can open the windows on a nice day will be very much appreciated. Obviously there's no seat for the fireman, but today I'm the driver, which means I can spend my entire day sitting like this.
It wasn't long before Six had got a boiler full of pressure, so we headed out to find ourselves a train.
Oh wow, that is tight. Oh yeah. That's so tight. Right, so here we go. Now the most exciting thing about this is it has the most wonderful whistle, and I've enjoyed that very much on the drive up so far. The second point is this regulator is absolutely superb. The amount of control that you've got on it is brilliant. Now it is a particularly it's a particularly Welsh day. It's cold, it's drizzling, and it's a bit murky. And the size of the backhead here, the amount of heat that's coming off it, is wonderful because it's keeping off the cold. And that's a really appreciated thing right now. As we come around here, I can just tap the regulator a little bit. There's a bit of play in it, so you kind of rock it and just get that control. The amount of difference a single millimetre makes is quite phenomenal, but it is beautifully smooth. It's an absolutely wonderful thing. And also, I can drive it on the reverso. So we've notched up and then dropping down through one of the bits of the railway that's been excavated to make room for this thing to go underneath. And the thing that takes me by surprise most is just how good this is. This is its last stay in service. This is its last trip up the line. And it's going up like it's fresh out of the box. Everything on it is beautifully in time. Nothing leaks, nothing clatters, nothing bangs. It just storms up here. It's absolutely amazing. Now sure, it is a short wheelbase 040, and you don't half feel it. You feel every bounce, every change in geometry of the track as this thing just clatters its way down. It's not uncomfortable, but you're very much aware that you're going over rail joins or when it decides that it's going to change direction. And the seat here, well, the seat here is lovely, but I have to kind of wiggle myself onto it, and then I think the seat is actually there for when you stop so you can pose rather than when you're actually on the engine like now. One of the best things about this is the noise. The sound coming out of that chimney is absolutely glorious. And my only disappointment for the day is the fact it's a two-coach train, because I want to drive this when it's on the edge. I want to hear this thing absolutely roar away, because it's such a delightful noise. That long chimney really gives you just this perfect note. And this thing, being the smallest steam locomotive here at the Talyllyn Railway, is just such a pocket rocket. When I saw this the first thing this morning pulling the train out, it just moved away with a four-coach train like it was a light engine. It made no fuss whatsoever. And as we go up here, it hardly notices the fact we've got two coaches, including the newest coach. It's just simply unbothered. And for such a tiny locomotive, I expect it to feel the weight of a train behind me, and it's just going, yeah, whatever, off we go. It's a really powerful little machine. It steams phenomenally well as well. My fireman has kept it right on the line all day, and it keeps making steam. It just keeps on going. It's got to be one of the best things I think I've ever had a go on, just for the fact it just goes. There's no complaints, there's no problems, there's no hesitation. It's just stonking up here. And the sensation of power that this thing gives is absolutely addictive. There are very few engines I've driven on the narrow gauge that have given this sense of I have so much more to give. We're at line speed with 2, and the regulator is maybe a quarter open. We're not even getting close to what this engine could potentially deliver. And the stories say that before the boiler was replaced, the previous boiler had been working on a lower pressure. And the thing still thundered away with whatever was asked of it. This really does show why I love Barclays so much, because they're just absolutely fantastic engines. There's something really special about driving an engine like this that spent so much of its life on this railway. Yes, at one point it was a relatively newcomer to the Talyllyn, but now it's synonymous with this railway, and hurtling up the side of the mountains, overlooking the valley on a little steam engine is one of the most fantastic experiences I think I'll ever have, and it couldn't be made any better by this little thing. And that noise as we start really to climb is just so good. There is a reason that I like Barclays, and this is part of that reason. It's such a wonderfully happy little engine. It's a grin machine. It just puts a smile on your face. You want to do more with it, you want to go further, and to be able to take it on a decent run is fantastic. It's often something I find when I do these reviews. I want to take the engine further and do more with it and see what it'll do. And yes, I want to pull more with this. But to actually take it on a proper run and take it up the line is honestly the stuff that dreams are made of. It's just so good, I don't have the words for it. It may well be one of my favourite steam locomotives I've ever had a chance to drive. It's so responsive, it's got such a lovely character, and I don't even mind the fact that it does indeed move and bounce around. It helps you know exactly where you are. You can feel the railway beneath you. It makes you feel almost as one with the machine. And I could lose myself in that noise. The visibility as well, absolutely superb down here, not having a tank over the side of the boiler or on the running board at the side is absolutely magnificent. I can see it quite happily all the way front, and in fact the visibility is far better than I'd ever give it credit for. Despite that massive dome and that long chimney, I have far better visibility than I do on most similar sized tank engines, which is very, very pleasant to hear. As a driver, I feel very comfortable with this. Obviously when we're going back down that way, visibility is superb because that's the back. I can see everything out that way. It feels so at home here. And of course, this is so different to the rest of the fleet. It's such a different looking little machine. I can't believe that this is its last day. I can't believe it's come to the end of the ticket. And it's such a credit to the work that goes on here at the Talyllyn that they keep their engines in such top-notch condition that even on the last day, there's nothing that I can even put down as being wrong. The whistle blows by slightly and that's it. And if that's your biggest problem on an engine, that the whistle's blowing by, yeah, you've really cracked it when it comes to loco maintenance and looking after them, haven't you? It's absolutely something else. So the next thing we're going to do is, with a 2-coach train, I'm going to shut the regulator like that and just see how effective the steam brake is. So effective that even on a day like this, we can come to a stop very nice and quickly in a very, very poor railhead conditions. It's superb, this thing, and it's such a beautifully controllable steam brake. So, having come to a nice and controlled halt just before the whistle board, just before the viaduct, we can now get on our way. So, give it a seat through there. Brake off, and away we'll go. It is utterly, utterly addictive, that whistle. You have to be so careful when starting the offs because not only is it just an 040, but the sense of power it gives, you know that it will just spin up given a half a chance. And as we come through here, we're going to go through a slight cutting, so I can't resist. I've got a big love for the American locomotives with their chimes, and that just, I believe it's off of Britannia, and it just takes me straight back to the sounds of America as it echoes round stuff. And this is one of the most iconic parts of the whole railway as we come across the viaduct. And of course, I'm taken back to a certain story that's based on this, of an engine getting stuck on a viaduct. To one of the most beautiful and characterful stations, not just on the railway, but anywhere, as we come through Dolgok. It's so special. And we're not stopping here because we've got no passengers, so it's a rare non-stop train here at the Talyllyn. I'm very excited to be able to just carry our way straight through. And now as the line carries up, I can open up a bit more and just enjoy the sound from that chimney. What an absolutely fantastic machine. It honestly, and I know I said it before, but it doesn't seem possible that this is this thing's last day. It just feels far too good. It feels too new, too well looked after. I was expecting this to feel slightly worn, to feel slightly tired, to give some indication that it's coming to the end of its 10-year ticket. And there's nothing. It's just mind-blowingly good. That whistle is just the sound of happiness. It's absolutely brilliant. I can't get enough of this. I want to do more with this. This engine alone is almost enough for me to contemplate coming and volunteering here to have more times on it. It's genuinely that good. It's definitely within my top 10 of engines I've ever driven. Possibly even within the top 5. It's just... I love it. I love it. I can't fault it. It's just incredible. I want this. When I drove number 2, I said that I wouldn't want to own it because I wouldn't want to take it away from this railway because it's so ingrained with the history. This thing, as much as it is ingrained here, I'd have this in a heartbeat. It's just, I want this. I want to take this home with me. It's such a credit to the railway. No wonder so many of them call it the pride of the fleet. So that brings us to the end of the day here at the Talyllyn Railway on the final day of number 6. And what an absolute honour it has been to be on this, taking it out for one last day. It's got to be one of my favourite locomotives of all time and lives up to that reason that I love a Barclay. This thing's absolutely superb. It's just brilliant. So, a massive great thank you to everybody here at the Talyllyn Railway for inviting me along and allowing me to take out the pride of the fleet. It's been superb.
Now, in the years since this video was shot, 6 has been quite busy. It's been on display at the Severn Valley Railway, and I saw it at the National Festival of Railway Modelling at the NEC. And now volunteers have started the overhaul, and it's hoped that she's going to be back in service on the Talyllyn in 2027.
And with that, thanks for watching. If you have enjoyed this, and I'll be clicking somewhere over here for one of the other locomotives I've done here at the Talyllyn Railway, or down there for, actually, you know what? Another engine I've done here at the Talyllyn Railway. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. What a wonderful thing.